Good afternoon, friends. It's indeed a great pleasure as well as an honor to be here. At the very outset, I would like to congratulate my honorable friend Vishwanath Karad, who made all this possible, and the young leader of young leaders present here, Shri Rahul Karad. I also want to congratulate recipients of Adarsh Yuva Vidhayak Puraskar and the student leaders who spoke here very briefly. Well, friends, I'm going to speak in rapid fire. In 10 minutes, I want to cover the entire gamut of globalization. So you'll pardon me if I go a little fast. Is globalization a necessary evil? My short answer to this question is globalization is necessary and it is not necessarily an evil. First, let us understand the meaning of globalization. What does globalization mean? Globalization is Vaishvikaran or Bhumandalikaran. In economic sense, globalization means avoidance of being insulated or isolated from the mainstream. So it means basically integration with the mainstream of the rest of the world. How does this happen? Globalization happens essentially, economic globalization happens essentially through two channels. One is free trade across the country borders, and the second one is free movement of capital, and that can take two forms. It can take the form of either foreign direct investment or it can take a form of foreign portfolio investment. Why is globalization necessary? Let us look at the sequence of events. The world economic order that we see today, this was formulated at the end of the Second World War in 1945. And the IMF and the World Bank and the General Agreement on Tariff and Trade, GATT, or which was later renamed as the World Trade Organization. All this framework was created in 1945. Initially, Soviet Union and China, which were two major powers in our country, in the world, they refused to participate in the globalization process and they did not join the world economic order. But later, realizing that not joining the mainstream is self-defeating, अपने पैरों पर कुल्हाड़ी मारना है, ये जानते हुए Russia and China later joined International Monetary Fund, World Bank and WTO. China in fact tried 16 times to get into WTO, and as the Honorable Minister was saying, China has reaped the maximum benefit of globalization. Well, friends, today the situation is that the only countries in the world which have not been integrated with the mainstream, there are only two countries in the world, really only one country, and that country is North Korea. And to lesser extent, it is Myanmar. Myanmar is also joining. So you will agree with me that North Korea or Myanmar are not really the role models that we need to follow. So as far as India is concerned, there is a kind of conspiracy theory. बहुत लोग ऐसे मानते हैं कि ये जो इंटरनेशनल ऑर्गेनाइजेशन है वो सारे विकसित देश इकट्ठा होकर हमारे देश के पीछे पड़े हुए हैं. इसमें सोचने की बात है. हमारे देश की तरफ देखिए. We have 16% of the world's population. We have 3.5% of world's land, and undoubtedly the most brilliant people in the world. With all that, what is our share in the world trade? Our share in the world trade is less than 1%. Now, सोचने की बात ये है, just think about it, why should the countries with 99% share in the world trade come together and conspire against a country which has a share of less than 1%? Does that meet the requirement of common sense? It seems that the common sense is very uncommon. So the kind of conspiracy theory that floats around is completely wrong. Please remember that India is one of the founder members of all international organizations, including the IMF, the World Bank, and the WTO. कुछ लोग कहते थे, कुछ लोग का ये मानना था कि हमको स्वाभिमान के साथ में, स्वाभिमान को रखकर WTO को लात मारकर हमको बाहर आना है. ऐसे कदम उठाना ये स्वाभिमान का निदर्शक नहीं है. ऐसे कदम उठाना ये हमारी मूर्खता का निदर्शक होगा. WTO से अगर हम बाहर आ जाते हैं तो अगर ट्रेड डिस्प्यूट हो जाता है दूसरे देश के साथ में, अगर व्यापार के बारे में डिस्प्यूट हो जाता है तो हम कौन से फोरम में जाएंगे? हम कहीं के नहीं रहेंगे। इसीलिए हमको ये सारे अंतर्राष्ट्रीय संस्थाओं को उनके अंदर रखकर विधायक संघर्ष करना है। सबका साथ सबका विकास ये तत्व अंतर्राष्ट्रीय स्तर पर उतना ही महत्व रखता है जितना हमारे देश के अंदर रखता है। अर्थात हमारे देश का शाश्वत विकास अगर करना है तो दुनिया के और देशों का साथ देना होगा और वैश्वीकरण की इस प्रक्रिया में निरंतर हिस्सा लेते रहना होगा। Why is globalization not an evil? Why do I say that? First of all, please understand that in India, if you see historically, there is a one-to-one correspondence between prosperity and globalization. बहुत पुराने जमाने की बात अगर आप देखेंगे तो बात देखेंगे तो वसुधैव कुटुंबकम ये किसका नारा था? ये हमारे देश का नारा था, जिसको अभी ग्लोबलाइजेशन के रूप में वो आगे उभर कर आया है। किसी ने संशोधन किया है और उन्होंने बताया है दैट इंडिया शेयर, अखंड भारत का, द शेयर ऑफ इंडिया इन द टोटल global production in the year 1, when the Gregorian calendar started, when the Jesus Christ was born, at that time India's share was as large as 31.5%. So 1/3 of the share belonged to India. After that, during the first millennium, when India was very prosperous, during that time, India's trade knew no bounds. India was extremely globalized country for many centuries. During the British Raj, economic growth stagnated because at that time there were undue restrictions on international trade imposed by the British. After we got independence in 1947, and when we started the so-called planned economic development, for the first 3 decades, or say for up to 1991, first 40 years, we followed the model of closed economy. Instead of export promotion, we followed the model of import substitution. It turns out to be a big mistake because in 1991 we faced a major unprecedented crisis. Our foreign exchange reserves had dwindled to a level of less than $1 billion. So we had foreign exchange reserves which was barely sufficient to meet the requirements of 15 days of our import requirement. This was the situation, and 1991 when we faced the crisis, after that India changed its style. The so-called new economic policy came into being: liberalization, privatization, and globalization. That was a major turning point, and after that, we have never looked back. If you look at our growth, 1991 to 2001, our growth rate was 6% per year. Before 1991, our average growth rate was only 3.5%, and our population was growing at the rate of 2.2%, which meant that our per capita income was growing at a measly rate of only 1.3% per year. After 1991 reforms, when globalization started again, 1992 to 2002, our growth rate was 6%. 2002 to 2005, it was 8%. 2005 to 2008, it was 9% plus. And after that, there was a crisis and the growth rate slowed down a little bit. Now, what I'm trying to say is that in India, prosperity and globalization have always gone together, and therefore, to remain prosperous, we have to have globalization on our side. Globalization is a mixed blessing. Success of economic reforms can depend on timing, sequencing, and phasing. Fortunately, in India, globalization has been done by following a careful, cautious, and calibrated strategy towards globalization. Globalization can work to our advantage. We have made it work to our advantage so far, and we need to do that even further. There are big challenges, but there are bigger opportunities that the globalization is providing. We have to make the best out of it and make India a global economic superpower. And I have no doubt, looking at the youth assembled here with so much energy and so much talent, there is no doubt in my mind that we will make it to the top as the world's superpower in economic sphere. Thank you very much.